Commander Elena Reeves stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Audacity, watching as the Galactic Council headquarters came into view. The massive crystalline structure floated in space like a giant chandelier with delusions of grandeur, all spinning rings and glittering spires that screamed we're more advanced than you in architectural form. "Would you look at that?" Elena muttered to no one in particular. "It's like someone gave a disco ball steroids and a god complex." Lieutenant Miguel Rivera, communications specialist extraordinaire and the only person within earshot, snorted. "I'm pretty sure that design violates at least 3 laws of physics and good taste." "Remember the briefing, people," Elena called out to her small crew as they prepared for docking. "We are representatives of Earth. We are diplomats. We are professionals. We will not make jokes about how the Vex-Tari ambassador looks like a sentient booger, even if it's true." Science Officer Theo Park looked up from his datapad, his spectacles sliding down his nose. "Actually, the Vex-Tari's gelatinous composition is an evolutionary advantage for their methane-rich homeworld, and their flexibility allows them to." "I know, Theo," Elena interrupted with practiced patience. "Just try not to stare or take samples without asking this time." Security Chief Dani Okafor checked her sidearm for the 5th time that morning. "I still don't understand why they invited us. Our species out here think we're barely evolved apes." Elena sighed. "Because we're interesting. Currently surviving on a death world makes us the galaxy's newest sideshow attraction. Earth, as it turned out, it was classified as a Class 12 death world by galactic standards, a planet so hostile that evolving sentient life there was considered a statistical improbability. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic oxygen atmosphere, aggressive microorganisms, and predators everywhere. To the rest of the galaxy, humans were the cockroaches who not only survived but thrived in conditions that would kill most species. "Docking procedure initiated," announced the ship's AI. "Please prepare for atmospheric adjustment and artificial gravity alignment." "Game faces, everyone," Elena ordered as they approached the airlock. "Remember, we're here to join the Galactic Council, not start an interstellar incident." The reception committee waiting for them consisted of representatives from the Council's founding species. The Altari, with their iridescent feathers and beaks that somehow managed to look smug. The Zoltan, silicon-based beings who moved like living statues and spoke in frequencies that made human teeth vibrate. And the Meska, 8-limbed creatures whose translucent skin revealed disturbing glimpses of their internal organs. "Welcome, humans," intoned High Councillor Rax Zedar of the Altari, his beak clicking with each syllable. "We are most curious to meet representatives of your species in a formal capacity." "The honor is ours," Elena replied with a respectful nod that she'd practiced for weeks. "Earth is grateful for the invitation to join the galactic community." What followed was 2 hours of the most mind-numbing diplomatic pleasantries ever exchanged by sentient beings. Elena maintained her diplomatic smile through discussions of trade regulations, territorial boundaries, and interspecies etiquette, while silently counting the minutes until she could return to the ship and remove her dress uniform, which itched in places she couldn't scratch in public. It was during the ceremonial feast that everything went sideways. "I must say," remarked Delegate Thos Kem of the Meska, all 8 of his appendages arranging food on his plate. "It is remarkable that creatures from such a brutish world could develop spacefaring technology. Most species that evolve in high gravity, high oxygen environments tend toward primitive aggression, rather than intellectual advancement." Elena's smile tightened. "We're full of surprises." "Indeed," Thos Kem continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing tension. "Your planet's history of constant warfare is most disturbing. Tell me, do you still solve problems by hitting each other with sticks?" "Only on Tuesdays," Elena replied before she could stop herself. "Wednesdays are reserved for nuclear threats, and weekends are for passive-aggressive diplomacy. We like to keep things interesting." The room fell silent. Theo choked on his drink. Dani's hand instinctively moved toward her weapon before Miguel subtly restrained her. Thos Kem's internal organs visibly pulsed with indignation. This is precisely the barbaric attitude we feared, responding to a simple observation with threats and sarcasm. I believe it was a joke, offered High Counselor Raxidar, though his feathers were ruffled in apparent distress. A joke? About warfare? About violence? Thoskem's voice rose to a pitch that made several crystal glasses vibrate dangerously. This confirms everything we've heard about humans. They make light of destruction. They find humor in pain. And just like that, humanity's first formal diplomatic function with the Galactic Council devolved into shouting, accusations, and what Elena would later describe in her report as a multi-species hissy fit of galactic proportions. The emergency council session that followed could best be described as organized chaos. Representatives from 27 species argued in 14 different languages about whether humans should be immediately banned from council space or merely quarantined until they evolve proper sensibilities. Elena and her crew sat in uncomfortable chairs, clearly designed for beings with different anatomies, watching the spectacle with expressions ranging from mortification to barely concealed amusement. I'd like to point out, Elena said when finally given a chance to speak, that on Earth humor is often used as a diplomatic tool to diffuse tension. My response was not intended as an insult, but as a way to lighten the conversation. By making light of violence? Thoskem's organs pulsated with what appeared to be disgust. This only confirms our concerns. High Counselor Raxidar raised his winged appendage for silence. Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment. Different species have different customs. However, he fixed Elena with a penetrating stare. We cannot ignore that humans come from a world that has shaped them into resilient but potentially dangerous beings. What exactly are you implying? Elena asked, diplomatic smile firmly in place despite her growing irritation. The Council proposes a test, Raxidar announced. A series of trials designed to evaluate whether a species possesses the temperance and restraint necessary for Council membership. Theo leaned forward. What kind of trials? The trials of temperance were established 3 millennia ago, explained Councillor Vix of the Zoltan, her crystalline voice sending uncomfortable vibrations through Elena's molars. They test a species' ability to control their baser instincts, to prove they have evolved beyond their biological imperatives. Sounds reasonable, Elena said cautiously. What's the catch? No species has ever completed all 5 trials, Thosken stated with obvious satisfaction. Most achieve 3. The most advanced manage 4. None have passed the 5th. Dani snorted. So you're setting us up to fail? We are offering you an opportunity to prove yourselves worthy, Raxidar corrected. If humans are truly ready for galactic citizenship, they will demonstrate appropriate restraint and wisdom. And if we refuse? Miguel asked. Then Earth will be classified as a protected developing world, Vix answered. No contact permitted until you have evolved further, perhaps in another 1,000 years. Elena exchanged glances with her crew. Theo looked intrigued, Dani suspicious, and Miguel was already calculating the political implications for Earth. We accept your challenge, Elena declared, ignoring the warning look from Miguel. When do we start? Immediately, Raxidar replied. Your crew will represent humanity in the trials. You have 1 standard cycle to prepare. As they were escorted back to their vessel, Dani muttered under her breath, Did you just volunteer us to be lab rats in an alien experiment designed to prove we're barbarians? Pretty much, Elena admitted. But think of the alternative. If we refuse, Earth gets quarantined. If we fail, at least we go down fighting. Fighting is exactly what they're expecting from us, Theo pointed out. These trials are likely designed to provoke our baser instincts meaning our human tendency toward aggression when frustrated. Then we don't give them what they expect, Elena said firmly. We're going to ace these trials and make them regret challenging humanity's restraint. Back on the Audacity, they received the official parameters for the trials. As Miguel read through them, his expression cycled through disbelief, amusement, and horror. These aren't tests, he finally declared. They're torture disguised as evaluation. How bad? Elena asked. Bad enough that they might qualify as war crimes under the Geneva Convention, Miguel replied. They're designed to find every species' breaking point, and apparently they expect us to snap like twigs. Then we don't snap, Elena stated simply. We bend, we adapt, we overcome. That's what humans do best. Even better, Dani added with a dangerous grin, we do it with style and make them question everything they think they know about us. As they reviewed the trial specifications, Elena felt a growing determination. The Galactic Council thought they were dealing with simple death worlders being shaped by a harsh environment into predictable patterns of behavior. They had no idea what they were about to unleash. Humanity hadn't just survived Earth's challenges. They'd turned survival into an art form, complete with inappropriate humor and the stubborn refusal to quit, even when quitting was the sensible option. Get some rest, Elena ordered. Tomorrow we show the galaxy what humans are really made of. The trial of patience began at what the Council considered dawn, though in space, such distinctions were largely ceremonial. Elena and her crew were led to a massive auditorium where other species observed from tiered seating, murmuring among themselves as the humans were positioned in uncomfortable chairs at the center of the room. The trial of patience tests a species' ability to endure tedium without resorting to disruptive behavior, announced Councillor Vix. You will observe a traditional Zoltan philosophical opera. The test concludes when the performance ends. Any attempt to leave, interrupt, or distract from the performance will result in failure. How long is this opera? Elena asked. 12 standard hours. Vix replied with what might have been a smirk, if crystalline beings could smirk. It depicts the growth of a single crystal formation, is a profound metaphor for existence itself. Elena glanced at her crew. Theo looked genuinely interested, the scientist in him curious about alien art forms. Dani's eye was already twitching at the thought of sitting still for 12 hours. Miguel wore the resigned expression of someone who'd endured countless diplomatic functions and had developed the ability to mentally check out while appearing attentive. Remember, Elena whispered as the lights dimmed, we're representing Earth. Just find your happy place. The opera consisted of a single Zoltan performer standing motionless on stage while emitting various frequencies that occasionally changed pitch. Sometimes minutes passed between these changes. There was no plot, no action, and no intermission. By hour 3, Dani had developed a system of microscopic exercises that allowed her to maintain muscle tone without visibly moving. By hour 6, Miguel had composed 3 sonnets in his head and was working on translating them into Altari. Theo had fallen into a state of scientific meditation, analyzing the acoustics and frequency patterns of the performance. Elena's strategy was lists. She mentally catalogued every meal she'd eaten in the past year, then every book she'd read, then every inappropriate joke she'd ever wanted to tell during diplomatic functions but hadn't. When the performance finally ended, the council members seemed disappointed that the humans remained conscious, let alone calm. Most impressive, Raxidar admitted reluctantly. The Frovian delegation once erupted into mass hysteria at hour 9. Lovely performance, Elena commented with a straight face. The part where the frequency shifted from 432 Hz to 433 Hz was particularly moving. The trial of restraint began immediately after a brief recess. The humans were led to a sterile chamber and seated at a table laden with an assortment of foods from across the galaxy. You have not been provided nutrition for 18 hours, Vic stated. Before you are culinary delicacies that have been analyzed as safe for human consumption. You may observe but not consume them for the next 6 hours. Dani stared at the spread. That's it, we just don't eat the food. Correct, Thoskem confirmed, all 8 limbs clasped in apparent anticipation. But most species find their hunger overrides their discipline. Here, Miguel said. You guys would hate Ramadan. For 6 hours they sat before food that smelled increasingly delicious as their hunger grew. Theo distracted himself by scanning the dishes with his portable analyzer and documenting their composition. Miguel practiced meditation techniques. Dani napped, having learned in military training that sleep was preferable to hunger. Elena told tales of Earth's cultures and histories, focusing particularly on times when humans endured far worse than missed meals. She spoke of hunger strikes for political causes, of religious fasts that lasted for days or weeks, of explorers who survived on minimal rations in extreme conditions. When the trial ended, the council seemed perturbed. Did they even experience hunger? Whispered one observer loudly enough to be heard. We absolutely did, Elena corrected. We just have context for it. The trial of tolerance proved more challenging. Each crew member was isolated in a chamber, with what the council described as the galaxy's most irritating being a Nixtari diplomat, renowned for its ability to find and exploit psychological pressure points. Elena's Nixtari began with subtle criticism of her leadership, then progressed to questioning her competence, her appearance, and finally her species' right to exist. The creature had clearly studied human psychology enough to know which buttons to push. Your primitive emotional responses make you unsuitable for advanced civilization, it proclaimed in a voice like fingernails on a chalkboard. Your species' history of warfare makes you little better than animals. Elena smiled pleasantly. That's an interesting perspective. Would you like to hear about our concept of customer service representatives? I think you'd find it relevant to your current role. For 4 excruciating hours, each human endured personalized psychological torment. When they emerged sweaty but composed, their tormentors looked distinctly frazzled. The female human told me stories about something called internet comment sections that have left me questioning reality, one Nixtari reported, its tentacles trembling. The security officer just smiled. For 4 hours, without blinking, whispered another. The communications specialist corrected my grammar. In 17 languages, a third complained. The science officer kept asking for samples of my secretions for analysis, the fourth added, clearly traumatized. The council huddled in discussion as Elena reunited with her crew. How did you manage? She asked Dani, who looked suspiciously serene. I invented a game take a mental shot every time it said something predictably offensive. I'd been mentally drunk for the past 2 hours. Raxidar approached, feathers distinctly unruffled. You have passed the first 3 trials. This is unexpected. I praise, Elena replied with a diplomatic smile. What's next? The 4th challenge was held in a circular chamber lined with observation windows. At the center stood 4 identical platforms, each equipped with restraints and surrounded by medical monitoring equipment. The trial of surrender, announced Councillor Vix, her crystalline tones reverberating ominously, tests a species' recognition of its own limitations. Knowing when to yield is as important as knowing when to persist. Let me guess, Elena said, eyeing the platforms with suspicion. You're going to hurt us until we give up. Crude but accurate, Dazkem replied, his organs pulsing with what appeared to be anticipation. Each contestant will experience gradually increasing discomfort. You need only say I surrender to end your participation. And if none of us surrender? Dani asked. The council members exchanged glances. That has never occurred, Raxidar stated. All species have a breaking point. As the humans were secured to the platforms, Elena whispered to her crew, remember your training. Pain is temporary. Don't let them win. Oh please, Miguel scoffed. I've had hangovers worse than anything these guys can dish out. I grew up with 3 older brothers, Theo added with unexpected steel in his voice. I know about endurance. The discomfort began as a mild tingling sensation across their skin. Over the next hour it intensified to pins and needles, then a deep ache, then sharp, stabbing pains that migrated unpredictably throughout their bodies. The council observers watched in silence as monitoring equipment displayed the human's vital signs. Heart rates elevated but remained steady. Stress hormones increased but plateaued. Most surprisingly to the aliens, the humans began to talk to each other. Hey Theo, Dani called out through gritted teeth. Remember that time we got caught in the ion storm near Europa? How could I forget? Theo replied, his voice strained but controlled. 3 days of emergency protocols with critical system failures every 20 minutes. This is nothing compared to my Aunt Lucia's family dinners, Miguel contributed. The emotional pain alone would make this feel like a spa treatment. As the pain intensified further, the humans' conversation shifted from distraction to competition. I've had worse paper cuts, Elena declared. I once stepped on a Lego barefoot, Theo countered. Childbirth, Dani stated simply, causing the other three to concede that round. The council members watched in growing alarm as the humans not only endured but somehow turned their suffering into some sort of twisted bonding exercise. When the pain reached levels that had caused every previous species to beg for mercy, the humans began to laugh strained, painful laughter, but laughter nonetheless. "What is happening?" Kem demanded, his appendages waving in agitation. Their neurological readings indicate extreme pain. Yet they laugh. "Gallows humor," Raxidar murmured. "I've read about this. It's a human psychological defense mechanism." "It's unnatural," Vix insisted. "They should have broken by now." After 3 hours, when the pain threshold reached maximum levels, the council was forced to end the trial. Not one human had surrendered. As medical staff released them from the platforms, Elena stumbled slightly, then straightened her shoulders and faced the council. "I believe that concludes the 4th trial. When do we start the final one?" The council chamber erupted into chaotic debate. "They cannot be allowed to continue," Kem insisted. "No species has ever completed the 4th trial without at least one member surrendering. The protocols do not allow us to disqualify them for succeeding," Vix pointed out, her crystalline form vibrating with agitation. "Perhaps," suggested Raxidar, "we have underestimated the human capacity for endurance. They evolved on a death world after all." "Or perhaps," Kem countered, "they are simply too primitive to recognize when they should yield. Even the most basic organisms fight until death rather than strategically surrender." Elena cleared her throat. "We can hear you, you know." The council members turned, seemingly having forgotten the humans were still present. "What you call a failure to yield," Elena continued, "we call perseverance. It's not that we don't know our limits. It's that we've learned our limits are rarely where we think they are." Raxidar's feathers rustled thoughtfully, a perspective worthy of consideration. "Nevertheless, protocol demands the trials continue. Prepare yourselves for the final challenge." As they were escorted to recovery pods to prepare for the final trial, Dunny muttered, "Is it just me, or are they starting to look scared of us?" "Good," Elena replied. "Maybe they'll finally start taking us seriously." The chamber for the trial of truth resembled nothing so much as a hybrid between a medical bay and a meditation room. 4 reclining chairs surrounded a central pillar that emitted a soft, pulsing light. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something almost floral. "The final trial," Raxidar announced with ceremonial gravity, "tests not physical endurance but psychological fortitude. Each contestant will face their deepest fears, not merely physical dangers, but existential terrors that define your species." "So, what you're going to read our minds?" Elena asked skeptically. "The apparatus accesses your neural patterns and manifests representations of your core anxieties," Vix explained. "Previous species have faced fears ranging from predators of their evolutionary past to cosmic horrors specific to their psychology." "And the point is?" Miguel prompted. "To determine how you respond to fear." Kem stated simply. "Aggression? Paralysis? Surrender. Each response reveals much about a species' fundamental nature." The humans exchanged glances. This was potentially more dangerous than physical pain. Their minds, their private fears, exposed to alien judgment. "We consent." Elena decided for the group. "Let's get this over with." As they settled into the chairs, neural interfaces activated with a gentle hum. The chamber darkened, and the central pillar's light intensified, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. "Focus on the light," instructed an unseen technician. "The process works best when the conscious mind relaxes its defenses." One by one, the humans slipped into a trance-like state, their vital signs displayed on monitoring screens for the council observers. What they didn't know was that the observers would also see manifestations of their fears projected as holographic displays. The first signs of trouble came when the technicians reported confusion in the readings. "Their fear responses are complex," one reported. "Most species generate clear images of specific threats. The humans produce layered scenarios with abstract elements." On the projection, Theo's fear manifested as an endless library with books turning to dust as he tried to read them, knowledge eternally slipping beyond his grasp. Yet intertwined with this was a deeper fear of his research being used to harm, rather than help, of unintended consequences from well-meaning discoveries. Miguel's fear appeared as isolation, not merely physical solitude, but the existential terror of being fundamentally misunderstood, of translations that could never capture true meaning, of connection always falling just short. Dani's manifestation showed not enemies she couldn't defeat that would have been straightforward, but instead innocence she couldn't protect. An ever-expanding circle of responsibility where every success revealed 10 new vulnerabilities. And Elena's fear, which caused the most consternation among the observers, was failure cascading through generations. Not personal failure alone, but failure that rippled outward. Humanity denied its place among the stars because of her mistakes. Earth isolated for centuries because she couldn't navigate alien politics, her crew suffering because she'd made the wrong call. These are not simple phobias, Raxidar observed, his voice hushed. These are existential complexities, moral fears. Precisely why they are dangerous, Thoskem insisted. Their fears reveal minds that constantly evaluate consequences across time and circumstance. This is not the simple fight or flight instinct of a balanced species. What truly disturbed the Council, however, was how the humans responded to their fears. Instead of fighting or fleeing, they engaged. Theo walked deliberately into his disintegrating library, attempting to preserve what knowledge he could while accepting the impossibility of knowing everything. Miguel reached out to the shadowy figures that couldn't understand him, finding humor in the miscommunications even as he persisted in trying to bridge the gap. Dani's response was to establish priorities, to save who she could, while acknowledging she couldn't save everyone. A strategic acceptance of limitations without surrender. And Elena faced her cascading failures by continuously adapting, finding new approaches when old ones failed, maintaining a core of determination even as scenarios worsened around her. They're not overcoming their fears, Vix realized with growing alarm. They're incorporating them, using them. This is how humans evolved, Raxidar said softly. On a world where danger was constant, fear became not an enemy but a tool. As the neural interfaces deactivated and the humans gradually returned to consciousness, the council members had already withdrawn to deliberate. Elena blinked awake to find her crew looking as disoriented as she felt. "Did we pass?" Theo asked groggily. "I have no idea," Elena admitted. "But whatever they saw in our heads has them spooked." "Good," Dani said firmly. "Maybe now they'll think twice before underestimating us again." The council's deliberation lasted far longer than protocol dictated. Through diplomatic channels, Elena learned that the members were deeply divided. Some argued that humans had technically passed all 5 trials and must be admitted according to council law. Others insisted that the very manner in which humans passed the trials, particularly their responses to pain and fear, proved they were too unpredictable to join galactic civilization. After what seemed like an eternity of waiting, the human crew was summoned to the Grand Council chamber for the verdict. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding Earth's petition for membership," Raxidar announced, his tone carefully neutral. "While humanity has, by technical standards, completed the trials of temperance, certain concerns remain about your species' integration into galactic society." "Let me guess," Elena said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm anymore. "We're too primitive despite passing tests that your advanced species created specifically to make us fail." "It is not a matter of advancement, but of compatibility," Vix clarified. "Your responses to the trials were unprecedented." "You mean we didn't break?" Dani translated flatly. "Every species has a breaking point," Thoskem insisted, agitation causing his organs to pulse visibly. "It is a natural evolutionary development, the recognition of when continued resistance becomes counterproductive to survival." "Except humans," Miguel noted with a slight smile. "We just redefine the breaking point as a challenge." "And therein lies our concern," Raxidar said. "A species that does not recognize its limitations poses unpredictable risks." Elena had had enough. She stepped forward, ignoring the subtle shift in the council guards' postures. "Let me be perfectly clear," she said. Humans understand limitations better than you can imagine. We just refuse to accept them as permanent. Every major advancement in human history came because someone decided to push past what everyone else considered impossible. A dangerous philosophy, Ken murmured. Only to those who benefit from keeping others limited, Elena countered. Now, either admit Earth to the Council as we've earned through your own trials, or prepare for the consequences. The chamber fell silent. Consequences? Raxidar finally asked. Theo stepped forward, holding up his data pad. We've been live streaming. Excuse me. Vix's crystalline form seemed to lose some of its luster. At the trials of temperance, the deliberations, everything, Miguel confirmed. Broadcasting back to Earth and to every diplomatic channel we could access. Turns out, quite a few species are interested in how the mighty Galactic Council treats potential new members. That's a violation of Council privacy protocols, Ken sputtered, all 8 limbs gesticulating wildly. Funny thing about those protocols, Dani added with a dangerous smile. They only apply to Council members, which you've just spent 3 days proving we're not. The implications dawned on the Council members simultaneously. Dozens of species across the galaxy had just witnessed the Council subjecting human representatives to trials designed to be impossible. Watched those humans succeed against all odds, and then observed the Council attempting to deny them membership anyway. This is unprecedented, Raxidar said faintly. You get used to it, Elena advised. Unprecedented is humanity's specialty. After another hasty deliberation, the Council capitulated. Earth was granted provisional membership status with full integration to be phased in over a standard galactic year. The official classification in the xenobiological database was amended to include a special notation, approach with caution, no known breaking point. As they prepared to return to Earth with news of their diplomatic victory, the human crew gathered in the Audacity's lounge for an impromptu celebration. To successfully turning a diplomatic incident into a war crime and back into a diplomatic victory, Elena toasted, raising a glass of contraband whiskey she'd smuggled aboard. To making the most powerful beings in the galaxy question their existence, Theo added. To humans, Miguel contributed. The only species that treats trauma as a team-building exercise. To the looks on their faces when they realized we'd been live-streaming their xenophobic reality show, Dani laughed. From a respectful distance, several Council observers watched the human celebration with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. They find humor in everything, Vix noted, even their own suffering. Perhaps that is their true evolutionary advantage, Raxidar mused, not their physical resilience, but their ability to transform adversity into something else, something dangerous, Ken insisted. Something necessary, perhaps, countered Raxidar. The galaxy has been stagnant for millennia. These humans who turn breaking points into war crimes and then joke about it may be exactly what we need. As the Audacity departed Council space, carrying news of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic victory, the crew was already planning Earth's integration into galactic politics. They had no illusions that it would be easy, but they had proven something vital. In a universe determined to find humanity's breaking point, humans would simply redefine what breaking meant, and probably make inappropriate jokes about it afterward.